Good afternoon and welcome to our latest SBC webinar, Accelerating Profitable Play, Preventing Bonus Abuse whilst ensuring responsible gambling. A really important subject today. We're gonna tackle it head on and do our best to provide some really important insights into the industry. And we have a really good panel to do it as well, a decorated panel bringing lots of different perspectives from all corners of the industry. So any questions that you have, please feel free to get them in, and we will endeavour to get them answered. But let's get right into it because we've got so much to tackle today. So let's introduce our panel. I will let them introduce themselves. They can certainly do that better than me. And start from the top. Brittany, how are you?
I'm okay. Good. I get to go first. So I am Brittany Allen. I'm a senior trust and safety architect at SIFT. I've been working in fraud prevention and trust and safety for about 15 years at companies like Etsy and Airbnb. I will pass it on to Stephanie.
Hi, pleasure to join. Thank you for the opportunity. Stephanie Trin. I worked at SIFT, and my goal is to align iGaming use cases with innovation, and so spend a lot of time deep diving into the fascinating and nuanced world of iGaming.
Brilliant. And Vladislav?
Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be here. Vlad, you can call me Vlad for short. I'm currently group head of bonus abuse and gaming fraud for Evoke. I have over 12 years of experience specializing in various aspects of fraud prevention and management in the online gambling industry. Background includes expertise in chargeback prevention, cybersecurity fraud operations, and of course, bonus abuse and gaming fraud prevention. Passing the ball to Stephen.
Steve Armstrong. I'm the founder and director of FRL Compliance Solutions. Previously, Group MLRO at both Hills and Betway. Previous to that, lots of experience in risk and compliance in payments and the finance space.
Amazing. And Miria, last but certainly not least.
Hey everyone, I'm Mireia Bella. I am lead compliance governance at Batson Group for the past 5 years, where we basically establish governance frameworks for the entire group. So we manage policies and procedures, which we then disseminate to the rest of the business to ensure a cohesive approach to our processes.
Fantastic. And I guess we had quite a collaborative approach to the introductions there. You all passed the baton on, and really fits the theme of this panel, because I think that's what we're going to highlight, is that a collaborative approach when tackling fraud is of the utmost importance. But to kick us off, I guess there are so many things to kind of go into and so many aspects of this to kind of break down as an industry. But what can we do as an industry to ensure that we work smarter and not necessarily harder, work in a more efficient way when it comes to tackling bonus abuse and fraud? Vlad, if you kick us off there, if that's okay.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe the most trivial things at first, like we need to have good internal collaboration between different analytical and operational teams to ensure that proper controls are set and abuse is mitigated as soon as possible. Of course, be aware of any new trends that are arising, have the particular, let's say, products in place to be able to prevent and counter the fraudsters at best levels that this can be done. I will leave some of my colleagues also to add a few things, so I won't take the whole spotlight on me.
Very graceful. And Stephen, I know you obviously in your various roles, you kind of had to be ahead of the trends, right? That's it's so crucial.
No, it is. It's very crucial. I think that there's lots of different aspects of this, and the collaboration and working smarter starts right from stuff like good data, good knowledge of what you're actually looking at. And I think that the data is the key here. There's lots of places that may have the right strategy, might have the right approach, but if they're not looking at the right data or get the right data, then it's all going to fall over come the end of it. So for me, that collaborative bit is, you've got full teams, you've got risk teams, you've got AMLs, compliance teams, But if they're not all looking at consistent data, then actually they're not going to be able to work smart. So for me, yeah, that's definitely the starting point.
Yeah, and Stephanie, I know you you believe a lot in data from the conversations we've had. You kind of believe a lot in not just having a lot of data, but getting a holistic view of data and being able to utilize it in the correct way.
Yeah, and I like that Vlad and both Steve kind of started on a practical approach. I think as companies grow and expand, what you see is that there's a lot of data collected and being in different pieces. And the through line is really this concept of how can you not only think about data holistically, but operationally, how do you align that and mapping that specifically to the customer journey? It's a big task, but there's more data accessible than ever before. And it's a blessing and a curse, because what do you do with that and how do you keep that clean? I think it's a tactical strategy that needs to be instilled in the culture moving forward if it hasn't been already.
Yeah, no. Brittany, I'll let you kind of piggyback off that point.
Yeah, I think I'll both piggyback off of it and then pivot ever so slightly, because there's some things that had come up in my mind as others were speaking. And I think one great call out for working smarter and not harder is just to make sure that as an organization and as a fraud prevention unit, you've decided what your level of risk tolerance is for your business. And so you have that baseline, because everything will build off of that. The goals that you're looking to reach, the metrics that you need to hit to report up within your organization, they all fall back on just how much potential loss can we let through, how much of an appetite do we have for potentially turning away some legitimate customers as we make our decisions on how our approach to, in this case, preventing bonus abuse will work. But if you don't know what that overall risk tolerance level is that you have to sort of play within, then you might just think, well, let's try to stop everything. Let's try to fix it all. Let's try to be, on top of, let's put hours and hours and hours of effort into a little piece or an initiative that'll only move you up a couple of basis points in a metric that's not that important anyway. So that's one way that I really want everyone to make sure they still see the forest for the trees, so to speak. It's great to do the deep dives into data, like what Stephanie mentioned. Just know why you're looking at it and what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, that's really interesting. If I could just follow up there, like what will be some of the kind of metrics, the variables that dictate in terms of how much of a risk factor, an operator will be not happy to lose, but will be kind of okay to lose.
So I don't want to take all of the answers. I'm going to follow Vlad's lead and just say one thing and then pass it on. But I mean, in a highly competitive industry with a lot of options, monthly active users and return customers, your ability to not have somebody, let's say, if they've just heard about your brand because you're doing an advertising push on bonuses and you have an affiliate program spun up, you don't want to have those people become super frustrated, not even get to interact one time with your product and then bounce for a competitor. So I would throw that one out to start, but then I'll be quiet for a minute.
It makes a lot of sense. And Miriam, I'm going to come to you now just to kind of reflect on working smarter and not harder, and also some of the points that have been made already.
Yes, one of the first and important points was that there is this need for cross-departmental collaboration and knowledge sharing. And we see that comes also with training your workforce on multiple areas of compliance, all the horizontal areas, so that they are aware of the importance of everything, from AML, from RG, from fraud detection and risk. The entire workforce has to understand how these come together to one end goal. So training your workforce on all areas of compliance, not just a legal requirement, but it helps you to establish a good pediment for your employees to be able to work more efficiently.
Yeah, that's definitely a really important point. And Stephanie, I know you agree, right, that it's really crucial that the silos are broken down and that teams kind of work together and share data as well when it comes to tackling fraud.
Yeah, and I'm going to try to tie some of the themes that all together in terms of KPIs, data, and silos. What we often see kind of going down operationally is sometimes the payment teams, the fraud teams, the compliance teams in larger operations sometimes act in silos, and then compliance may sit across all top, and then there's KPIs, right? And they may differ. And so where is the risk tolerance across the company to understand at what points of the customer journey that risk tolerance is, and then creating a deep feedback loop between all three departments. And it could be as simple as making sure that there are weekly meetings. But when I think about KPIs and data, in some perspective, making sure that there is a clear KPI at every point of the touch point, but also that everyone has in some way, shape, or form the same KPI and enough communication and insights to understand. Let's say you're in a high growth market, you're dipping into Africa, you may talk to Vlad and say, you know what, just kind of open the gates a little bit. But that kind of KPI has to follow through, but also be communicated to the compliance team to understand how that impacts compliance in the same manner. And so KPIs, alignment, customer journey alignment, data mapping, but the communication between the internal teams. And then I will add a caveat to that. At SBC, we had a panel that had a lot of different vendors. And one of the takeaways is that the vendors in and of themselves have a lot of data about your players. Yeah. They have processes and technologies, and it's as simple as making sure that you communicate with them to extrapolate how much data they may have, so that can give you a little bit more flexibility when you do want to fine tune that risk tolerance across the journey.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of points there to touch on, and I'm going to kind of tap into Steve and Vlad in a sec. But first, Stephanie, when you talk about those vendors, do you mean like we need a bit more maybe support from the financial sector, the data from the financial sector?
The financial sector, the KYC sector, all, you can go to an exciting event like the SBC and the ICEs, and what you do see is just, it can be overwhelming. Even if you do not want to use them, I highly suggest understanding where they are pushing the envelope on insights to understand what you can glean from them, and doing your due diligence, and not only just staying on top of fraud trends, but seeing how innovation is giving you more insights to even kind of slightly adjust your strategy, whether it be compliance, because now you know that data is out there, and or if you don't want to, how can you glean it internally?
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting. And we've already had a couple of questions in, but first I want to kind of draw back to something else you said. And yeah, when it comes to kind of aligning those KPIs and breaking down the silos, internal meetings, just making sure everybody's working on it as a team. Steve, obviously that's very, it's kind of easy to say that, but in practicality at a large operator, how challenging is that?
Yeah, look, it's very challenging. I think that it comes back to education. I think I'm always a firm believer, if you've educated the right people on the process, educated them on the outputs, and actually it makes it a lot easier. Certainly in large operators, you could have 20, 30, 40, 50 people looking at the same set of data. And because there's been no education behind it, then what actually happens is it just creates mass confusion. And then you'll have commercial against compliance. And actually, generally, most of the time, you're both working for the same thing. Someone's just said it slightly differently. And when you bring in wider groups, when you've got maybe international departments and stuff, there's a word that someone in the UK might use that someone in Malta might describe it slightly different. And actually, again, it just creates mass confusion. So for me, one of the big things when I was in the operators was actually taking that time out to, if I was running with a set of KPIs to do with AML, for example, have I gone in before the big meeting when you've got 50 people reading a deck? Have you actually spent time with them individuals to educate them on what it means, why it's there, and actually the benefit to them? Because a lot of the time there is a benefit that actually can be used in other pieces. So yeah, massive on the education piece for me.
And Miria, I'll bring you in there. What challenges do you guys face when it comes to breaking down those barriers? Making sure that companies, that internally you're aligned on just KPIs and data sharing.
Yeah, going on to what Stephen is saying, it's education and it's also documentation of the policies and procedures. And in fact, obviously every market will have its own compliance requirements, but what we try to do is take learnings from each market and as much as possible apply a streamlined approach across markets, so it makes it easier for the rest of the business, for the other teams who are working working on this to understand the what procedures they have to follow. So definitely the documentation of requirements across the businesses is one important thing for everyone to understand what steps to take.
Okay, and I guess you can, Miriam, so you can learn lessons from various markets as you kind of become more global and move into different markets.
Correct. I mean, we see some markets where the regulators are issuing more and more information on what they expect, what controls and the level of controls they expect, which would make sense to apply for other markets. So we sort of see what makes sense, what's good for the business, but what's also good for the protection of the player at the end of the day, and try to apply it across.
Okay, yeah, and Vlad, I'll bring you in there on that one as well. Yeah, obviously bringing the operator perspective on kind of practical challenges when it comes to breaking down the silos.
Yeah, ultimately, what I just wanted to add to what Stephanie said is eventually that we also need really good communication with the commercial teams in order to be able to manage their expectations with new promotions and be able to prepare in advance to what may happen. Also monitor different KPIs like second time deposits, third time deposits, because it's very often that we can be challenged because we see decrease in FTDs. However, it's not necessarily something that is related to decrease of good customers. So essentially, there should be multiple KPIs that should be monitored and compared to ensure that the proper like proper end information is taken in consideration, if I can say it so. But yeah, for regarding what Mariah said, I would say that at least for me, it will be very essential that compliance guide us towards the policy they create, and then we need to align with within our processes to ensure not only the operational processes, but the strategies and the products that we implement are meeting the regulatory and, of course, compliance expectations. So, yeah, definitely it's something that we need to do in order not to work in silos. But I'm not saying mainly this needs to come from compliance, but it's very essential that we receive those guidelines from them.
Yeah, and Brittany, you were nodding as Vlad gave his answer then.
I was nodding through multiple parts of it. I'd like to go back to the data that he pointed to and just share a little bit about some of what I do within my work. So I run a deep and dark web investigations team, and we, in addition to just trying to stay on top of fraud trends and learning more about how fraudsters commit fraud, we'll see patterns in how they adjust their behavior based on what merchants are doing. And we have seen the, I guess, length of time that they would age an account really, really increase to the point where, beyond the research that we do, I actually had spoken to a iGaming company earlier in the year that told me that their average age of accounts that are used for fraud on their platform is about 1 year. So fraudsters have the patience to sign up 1 year ago in 2023 to be able to use that account today. And over the course of that year, they've perhaps done 10 euros in deposits a couple of times a week. They've done normal looking activity. They've bet on something but cashed out before the end of a game. They've taken little steps that make them look like a new participant. And that is something that the fraudsters are quite ready to do, because for them, it's an entire business that they are able to spin up. And so when I hear of people looking at some unreliable data points, like just looking at, let's say for credit cards, the bin and last four, but not also looking at behavioral patterns and not also looking at the actual full picture of what that account is up to, then that makes me a little bit more concerned, makes me worry more about being able to identify this. And, again, to touch on what we've talked about, not just fraud, but all the way up to those who are maybe chronically abusing policy, because also each year that line between what we would just consider abusive behavior and fraudulent behavior does continue to blur as fraudsters realize they can monetize things that we only considered abuse, and our policies haven't quite caught up with them yet.
And I would like to double click into that as we work a lot with operators to understand their behavior patterns. And it's interesting that Vlad had talked about deposit timing. I don't envy your job at all, or Steve, or Maria. It's in one hand, I think about it often as a cat and mouse game, and tying it back to the operator silos. Why is that important in terms of that plus data plus KPIs? Is that you're never going to be able to cast the mouse. They're going to multiply, and they're going to look like good mice. And how quickly can you adjust will be dependent upon, in large part, a human operation, right? Like how quickly can Vlad talk to Mariah because compliance is changing, and how deep and how quickly can you spot trends? Because, you know, they to Brittany's point, for 3 months they might have an attack plan of, okay, we're going to have this velocity, we're going to do these first deposits, and Vlad will catch them, and then in 3 months, 6 months, they might change it. And how do you know, and how quickly can you move? And moving one step above data to behavior is really where I think the key is, but it is extremely amorphous, right, in some ways, especially in this industry. And so going all the way back to that, I do not envy your job, but it is fascinating.
Thank you. Well, maybe
Yeah.
just to add to that, sorry to interrupt you, Job, but yeah, ultimately I was about to say that it's a constant game of cat and mouse. So basically it's all about hitting the fraudsters that bad so they can just move to somewhere else for some time until you meet them again. And just also I wanted to comment on what Brittany mentioned, actually, is that another smart adaptation that we see the fraudsters are doing is they are also creating a different online accounts on Facebook, let's say different other platforms, in order to try to bypass the checks that we are doing and etc. So it's very turbulent, and you need to be able to adapt to all those changes really quickly.
Yeah, and they're not only creating those accounts, but they're also, you know, committing account takeover and taking over valid accounts that have histories that they then don't have to bother setting up. And sorry to interrupt you there, Joe, but I just wanted to share, just where we took a last look at some email accounts from a popular email provider that were for sale, and they had very reasonably priced ones going all the way back to being created in 2006, at least for this listing. So that would give a lot of history and a lot of validity to that email if you were only looking at that single data point.
Yeah, I guess it really just underlines the importance of keeping up with trends and ensuring that you're flexible, right? Yeah, Miri, I'll bring you in there just to kind of follow up what the guy said.
Yes, and also brings on the point of having strong verification controls. So as soon as there is a anomalous activity, something which might raise a red flag, there needs to be specific tools which are raising these flags to the right people. And then you have policies in place which set when monitoring, when verification has to kick in, to be able to understand who is the person you are dealing with. Is it the same as the who is declaring to be the account holder?
Which is difficult to do at the front end for promo and bonus abuse, right? Because there really isn't.
We go again to this circle where we see the stolen identities usage and ensuring that we are verifying the players without creating friction. On the other hand, so it's in line. Sorry.
Oh, no. I just had a bromo. I love fraud stories are my favorite. They're just so interesting. One of the ones around promo abuse, and I think the through line around understanding behaviors is one of the iGaming customers had noticed promo bonus abuse. Long story short, it turned out that there was like 2 or 3 fraudsters that were going through their little town a little town in Eastern Europe and collecting IDs from the local villagers, and they were passing KYC. And then with now, responsible gaming and compliance, how do you how do you track that, and how quickly can you track that, and what are the compliance implications of someone complaining that their ID was stolen or used for this account? So again, do not envy your guys' job, but it is fascinating.
And it's almost impossible to keep up with that. It's so challenging, right? But Stephen, I'll bring you in for one of the questions that we've had here from our audience. Just to bring it back and really simplify it, what are some of the critical signals that experts should check for promo abuse?
But it's not just promo abuse, I guess. And this goes, when you talk about promo abuse, it links in with what you're looking at around responsible gambling, around KYC, signals that aren't just going to define one element. You're not setting up a matrix of controls that's just looking for promo abuse anymore. It's almost like there's so many different touch points. So when you think about, fraud and promo, we're looking at triggers in KYC, have they passed automatic verification, for example, or, has that failed? And then they're asking for documents. For me, that's always generally sometimes a big sign, because, if you've got enough of a presence online, certainly when you talk about the UK, for example, you're generally going to pass I won't name them all because they'll get free marking, but a different verification tool, that actually enables you to not have to send in documents. That's an early sign. What devices are they on? Is it is their IP address same as 10 other accounts that you potentially closed? Is the email linked to other customers? Is the phone number linked to other customers? Is there multiple customers at the same address, all in the same age range? There's so many different trigger points that don't just set you up for bonus abuse. It actually gives you the knowledge of a customer. And I think that's really, really key is whenever I've sat in regulatory audits or in front of the regulator, there's always this assumption that fraud and that happens at the end point. Well, actually, when you're talking about a control suite, it's from the moment that customer signs up, because you're capturing data from their device, you're capturing data that they're inputting. And it may seem that, it's not important, but all of that data builds a profile of a customer then and enables you to trigger different elements of it. And there's been lots of times, over the years where you're potentially looking at one thing and thinking, okay, this is this could be promo abuse, but actually it links into, actually, no, this is an individual who's got a problem, and actually he's signing up multiple accounts under multiple names because he's just trying to get a bet on. So all of these sort of interlink, but yeah, for me, it's, starting point is the moment that customer logs in or registers, we're tracking that data, be it device, etc. So yeah, many different elements to it.
Steph, I know you're a big believer in the through line between, as much as they're very, very different, the through line between promo abuse and responsible gambling that Stephen mentioned there. To give you the floor to talk on that.
Yeah, and I'll try and give a kind of story around sometimes complex and basic risk signals with combinations can go through the player journey. So let's say someone comes in and signs up for a bonus, and they pass the first test and they sign up as Steve Armstrong and not Stephen Armstrong. They pass a KY test. They use the bonus. Maybe they create a second account, not quite tracked, and they flag themselves as a self-exempt, or I'm a gambler, please don't do it again. The operator has a second bonus because they're expanding, it's game day or whatever, and then they register as Stephen Armstrong with a slightly different email, with a slightly different Facebook, and it filters through. And they get all the way, and they bet, and they bet at a velocity in which they are making a bunch of deposits but not withdrawing. So it's a slight variation, but you're not sure. And then they come back and say, "Hey, why did you let me gamble?" And so there's multiple checkpoints around the customer journey in terms of slight changes in behavior that could have been checked. And it's really difficult because you have to understand Where is it the KYC check? How does that difference in behavior as they go through the platform, and then they make a withdrawal. And then it's really difficult because you have to have some baseline layer of what's normal and then what the deviation is normal. So understanding and working together between those that check the front line, like Vlad, those are at the middle that are checking betting behavior, all the way down to payments because they're tracking deposit and withdrawals, and being able to at least say as an operator, look at every single risk signal and every single behavior that I have tried to track. And, Stephen had talked about it in a different discussion with him in terms of, please tell me if I got it wrong, but, almost proving your case as a compliance person that you've done everything possible to check with that. So it's not all on Vlad right at the front end, or it's not all on the payments team. It's the collaboration of the both and having risk signals across the entire customer journey.
Yeah, on that, Steph, I think that for the amount of times I've seen a policy say that a company has a zero tolerance to risk and fraud, or it's impossible. And so actually you're setting yourself up to fail that policy because you're saying you're not going to let any. The aim of all of us in what we do, myself and Vlad and others in them type of roles, is that you're trying to minimize the impact of it on your business, at the same time trying to catch the people that are doing it. So for me, it was always about that secondary check of, is a reporting element of this? Are we uncovering something bigger? Is it criminal? Do I need to be reporting to the relevant authority, etc.? But it's actually, I would never sit there and say, my role was to ensure that, there was never any crime that happened for an operator worker, because I'd be setting myself up to fail. It's about trying to, control how much of it happens, and it's learning from it to then stop that happening again. And as we keep speaking about it, then changes and changes and changes. So you're constantly learning something new about the way they might tackle it. But it's about minimizing the impact of that. And when you take bonus abuse, you take responsible gambling, for example, there is almost an assumption from people outside the industry that it should be stopped there. But actually, that's pretty impossible when you don't know enough about a customer who's just logged into your platform. It's about learning about that customer, to be able to interact and to intervene at the right stages, be that because you believe it's criminal, or believe it because you believe it might be an RG issue, or it might just be sort of promo abuse, for example. So it's really, for me, important that there is an acceptance within an organization that this stuff happens. And actually, it's how do you tackle this to minimize the impact both on your reputation, on your profitability, on your resourcing, and actually being able to distinguish between crime and promo abuse and RG. As much as they all use the same data points, there's a different need and a different interaction and a different outcome at the end of each channel. So it's really, really critical that that as a business you understand the difference between promo abuse and RG, or the difference between why a suspicious activity happens compared to this is a group of people chancing themselves to try and get free bets. It's the business understanding that I think is really key.
Yeah, definitely. And Brittany, I want to kind of bring you in there because it kind of goes back to your point at the top of the webinar.
Yeah, and actually, let's talk through some of those practical situations, because one of the things that can be frustrating is you hear a conversation from great and amazing experts like us who's gathered here today, and you see like what should be done, and you have all these ideas for what you can improve on, but then maybe you don't know exactly where to start. And we've called out the idea of getting over sideload teams a few times. And I've definitely had to do that within my work in fraud prevention. And that could be as kind of complicated as being the people who shut down the transactions and are seen as the revenue killers, trying to work with a internal sales team or trying to work with product. And in those instances, I've just found that if I can find that common ground on how to speak their language, then I'm able to kind of show them that I'm okay. I'm not something that's big and scary and should be kept out of the room until the last minute, because that could actually lead to a larger failure of whatever new product or revenue stream they're trying to launch. And so when I've worked with sales teams, instead of coming up to them and saying, well, your job is to, let's say, go out to different sport organizations and try to see who wants to work with us on a big push around this event. And you really don't want that to fall flat because all of the promotion you did around it, let's just tie it back to bonuses and say there was a bonus code attached to that, gets tied back to fraud. You don't want all of your work to go to waste. So here's what you need from my team that will allow you to avoid that and make it easier on you. They can work smarter, not harder. I mean, the same thing with product. I've dealt with teams where they were, let's say, previously only in an app, but now they're adding a payment functionality to web. And maybe they're adding it in a new geography. And so we've launched a new payment provider for that. And they didn't want to worry about putting fraud prevention or having that tied into our overall system before they launched because, fraudsters won't notice. That's just one little thing we've ticked up in this particular geo or on this particular platform. But me being able to step in and explain what could actually happen in terms that they understand. And that all then, like I said, goes back to how do they report their success and how can I show where fraud prevention will keep that safe. So you're so cross-functional in fraud prevention. You work with customer support, product and engineering. You work with operations. If your chargeback disputes or ACH disputes are handled by finance, you have to work with them too. And so that is an indispensable skill to have within this role.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And Miria, I want to bring you in for kind of one of the questions we've had come in. Just where would you draw the line between a customer legitimately seeking to maximize the return from a bonus versus a bonus abuser?
So, like we're saying, there's overlap in assessing these behaviors, and this is where the company has to understand the tools and the data it has at its disposal to be able to come up with a comprehensive framework of markers of harm and red flags, and ensure that where there is these triggers which are triggering and pointing to specific behaviors, it's communicated to the rest of the teams, not just siloed to one particular team.
Yeah, I guess it underlines the importance of just being spotting the red flags or being embracing the customer throughout the whole journey. And Vlad, I'll give you a chance to answer that one as well. Where would you draw the line between a customer legitimately seeking to maximize return from a bonus versus a bonus abuser?
Yeah, I assume it really depends on how you look at it and how much risk you're, let's say, able to allow for this particular I don't know, operator, brand, or etc. So eventually you can ease the controls if you are sure that, let's say, you can have more opportunistic abuse, which you will expect for them to return at some point and deposit, play with you, and etc. When it comes to bonus abuse, maybe it's easier to draw the line between the bonus and promotion abuse, because then you will have from one end people that will be searching to maximize the return from a particular bonus, while the promotion abusers will try to use different approach, exploit different promotions, use other prohibited behavior, like, for example, chip dumping, live casino, poker, and etc. So it really depends on how you look at it and what risk you're able to take.
And I would like to add on to that. We often get this request around or question around, how do you stop bonus abusers at the front gate, right? How do you not even let them in? And what Vlad had kind of tapped into was, a lot of the bonus abuse happens after sign up, and the good fraudsters that do the max amount of damage. We're not talking about, mom and pop trying to capitalize on 2 bonuses. The ones that have real damage are pretty strategic, and they will sometimes wait and behave differently further down the funnel than the initial kind of open the gates. And so sometimes we do get questions, how, I don't want to even let them in. Can you do that? And that's the risk tolerance and the balance between the commercials and of trying to stop everyone at the gate is probably not good, because you really don't know if that person ends up, who might have intentionally tried to do bonus abuse, ends up being a good player. It's really monitoring them in some ways further down the line, but keeping them within that compliance guardrail. I think is key.
And Steph, on that, I think that one of the elements of it is when we talk about the cross department piece earlier, is it's generally a commercial team putting in a new marketing or bonus in place, and actually what tends to not happen is that stress test of that in an environment, because it's generally one event to the next. You've got Cheltenham, then you're into Premier League, then you're into this, and actually I think there's enough evidence now from operators that actually they could be stress tested on it. So actually, when one of my pushbacks was always to the commercial guys, well, look, this is your marketing campaign. Yes, I'm here to add value to it and ensure it's, but actually if it's not working, you guys needed to come to us before you switched it on in a way, and let us test that and actually create a program, because a lot of the time they're switched on for fast events and then it's like, it's a week spell, but actually we should 3 months before have already built out what we would expect and who we would see. Take a horse race in Cheltenham, we're going to most likely get a different demographic of individuals who's going to be signed up to that compared to an Ascot race, where it tends to be, I'm not going to offend anyone here, but it tends to be younger people going to Ascot for a day out, groups of friends. Whereas if you go to a Cheltenham festival, it's your old school racing panels, so it's all of that can be combined to make sure that it becomes profitable from a marketing and from a commercial element. But with that becomes, have you assessed that, it might be amazing, you might get 1 million more sign-ups, but actually you're losing money behind the scenes because actually you've not thought through strategy and controls behind it. So for me, it's that early testing, and being able to give the likes of Vlad, as we said, I can define a policy, but then hand that over to individuals like Vlad, who then build out that control function to say, okay, this is how I'm going to meet this policy, and this is how I'm going to, minimize the impact of that to the business. I think not enough is done on something like promo abuse. We know we do it a lot on the KYC, on RG. We do it, it's the hot topics. But actually, when you go back to the basics, it's, how do we make it profitable? Because that's what these marketing campaigns are about. And it's led by a commercial person, but actually it's one of the things where the opposite way tends to happen is that's their policy in terms of their campaigns. Now we're going around to go, okay, how can we make this okay? Whereas normally it's compliance saying, here's my policy where I'm in that guidelines. So it's quite a unique thing with promo abuse in that sense, because it does flip the roles a little bit.
True.
Yeah, Vlad, I'll let you kind of come in there.
Ultimately, not much to add here. I think Stephen really elaborated it quite good. Ultimately, there should be a good communication between commercial, and enough time should be given for the analytical and fraud teams to prepare for eventually big events and let's say new promos that eventually might lead to increase in abuse, operational work, and etc. Of course, ensure that the proper rules in the fraud solution systems are set, just to make sure that you are ready to meet the consequences at that point.
And what are the challenges in? Oh, go on, Brittany. Sorry.
Oh no, I hadn't started to say anything.
Sorry.
I think that my thought around that, and just to think about what Steve said about the different behaviors of different games, different markets. One thing that I don't see enough of, but it's out there, is the collaboration of best practices. I know gaming is so competitive, but when you enter those, use your network. There are, especially in the vendors who sit across different ones, they may have best practices already, and reach out to your network to say, hey, if we're expanding into Nigeria, what are some common trends, and giving, the amount of times I've seen, oh God, the fraud teams or the payments teams is saying, oh God, they've launched this already. Like, we need to do this tomorrow. But making sure you give the fraud team, the payment team, or whoever, the compliance team, enough heads up is key, but also tapping into the best practices of your networks and your vendors and, SBC, professional services to say, you're not the only operator here. Can we collaborate a little bit? And you may get pushback, you may not, but there's no harm in kind of asking, Yeah.
And Miria getting enough time, getting these promos stress tested. That's vital from a compliance point of view as well, right?
Yes, like Stephanie's saying, when you launch a new market or you're going through a new venture, it's a collaborative effort, and maybe it's also the role of compliance, who's a bit central, to put the importance on this topic also to be tackled from the get-go, because sometimes much focus is put on certain elements, and then other areas of compliance are tackled as we go along and not from the beginning. So that is also important, that from the get-go of delving into a new market or expanding, these items are reviewed from compliance and are put on paper, put on policies, which are then communicated to the teams.
Yeah, and Brittany, I want to come back to you here just for a kind of a new one. You mentioned aging accounts, new threats. What can companies do just to ensure that they do kind of stay up to date with the latest threats, I guess, and they make sure they're fully equipped to know what they are tackling.
Yeah. So to go back to some of the questions that we've had come through from the audience, figuring out who is a bonus abuser or what that even means. There was a word that was said a little earlier, opportunistic. And I think that's an important distinction to make. Like, know which of the people who are violating or breaking a policy or otherwise taking actions that you're not really keen on, how much of that is just opportunistic actions and how much of that is organized and malicious. Because what's organized and malicious should have a pattern. Stephanie mentioned, it's really hard to stop them from the moment they sign up. But what if you already know that they are a malicious actor because of the connections that they have to a prior pattern you've identified and other accounts you've already taken action on? So don't lose sight of that. But when we're looking to find research and to go in, that's actually something that I do give trainings on, just because I'm always concerned about people, not having the greatest OPSEC when they're looking at the deep and dark web and, maybe getting themselves into a little bit of issue. Please, on your work computer, don't click any links. I don't want to be responsible for anyone's work computer getting taken over. But beyond that, if you attend conferences or if you follow certain thought leaders on LinkedIn and other platforms who are able to share research that they find, that can be really, really beneficial. But also just ask. I'm sure that anyone else here who has a team within their org that does that type of monitoring, they're also happy to give some recommendations. And because of the way that fraud has shifted in recent years, especially in an accelerated manner since 2020, to where they are more comfortable operating out in the open, you'll actually find a lot that you can start with on apps like Telegram that don't require as much work or software to access like onion links do. So there are places that you can start and to begin to gather some of that intelligence. But I just say again, not on your work computer, and please don't blame me. Please don't blame me.
And I like to double click. Vlad has an interesting, I think you had introduced yourself and bringing in the security piece. Security and account takeover is typically sat on one side of the house. But what Brittany is doing, and I always find fascinating whenever she shares her insight, is how much of that is now being sold on the dark web. And the through line is between security and account protection and bonus abuse and multi-accounting and online gaming is really starting to merge. And outside of behaviors, what I often see, and it's difficult, it's just a business is a business and we're all run by people, is that I bet you Vlad has some really, really, really deep insights that he spends a lot of days in terms of player behavior. And I bet you the payment team has really, really deep insights around how the nuances of different behaviors and payments types. And so going back to that cross intelligence, right, is really important to have almost those discussions around. And it's hard because everyone's putting out fires, but really taking a moment as operation to share, like, this is the trend I'm seeing in payments to be linked to promo abuse. And that can be linked to the dark web. And also asking your network and the vendors to see to understand like what is happening on their end at the KYC that is actually coming through the bonus abuse, that is filtering through all the way to the payments team. You guys are like FBI profilers here in the US. You understand really distinct behavior and it changes. And so it's not just data, it's not just behavior, but it's sharing those really deep insights, I think is really key across the departments.
Yep, definitely agree with you. Ultimately, after the merge of, for example, the merge of 888 and William Hill, we were able to use like the best practices from both ends, and it was funny how at some point we saw same fraud profiles that were eventually trying to exploit, and same happened also years ago with Mr. Green when William Hill took Mr. Green. But yeah, that this leads us to the conclusion that eventually they are trying their best efforts everywhere, all across the business. Thus, it's very important to and underlining what you said, to make sure that eventually you have all the insights available from your fraud vendors, fraud solution vendors, and etc. Whatever they can provide for you as information is essential to ensure that you are able to detect the new trends and are up to date with those trends. So definitely agree with you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to end, and yeah, we have run out of time, but I feel like we could talk about this all day. It's so interesting, such a good discussion, so much to deep dive into off the back of it as well. And yeah, thank you to a really esteemed panel for your time and your insights, and thank you to everyone for tuning in as well and for your questions. Really appreciate it, and thank you, and thanks ever so much.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
Cheers, Joe.